October 7th was the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. It was an attempted genocide by a terrorist group that calls for Israel's annihilation. It was, for the Washington Post, armed resistance. Claire Parker wrote in the Post that Palestinians have engaged in armed resistance since the state's founding in 1948, when an estimated 750,000 Palestinians fled or were forced from their homes. Armed resistance is the euphemism terrorist groups like Hamas use for their terrorism. Parker is literally echoing terrorist rhetoric. She's also dead wrong. Arab terrorists have been attacking and murdering Jews in the Holy Land since decades before Israel's rebirth. They resented any social or political equality with Jews and perpetrated organised mass violence as early as 1920 with the Nabi Musa riots in Jerusalem. Amin al-Husseini, a future Nazi collaborator, initiated a pogrom with a mob chanting, "Palestine is our land, the Jews are our dogs." That would result in 5 Jews murdered and hundreds more wounded. In 1929, al-Husseini instigated more anti-Semitic pogroms throughout the land, including in Hebron. One British policeman, Raymond Cafferata, testified that he witnessed an Arab cutting off a child's head with a sword. Journalist Pierre Van Parsen reported that one rabbi's house looked like a slaughterhouse, and that around the frame of a photograph of Theodor Herzl, the murderers had draped the blood-drenched underwear of a woman. In Safed, eyewitness David Hacohen testified that the murderers burst into orphanages where they smashed the children's heads and cut off their hands. While the 1929 pogroms may be among the best known, Arab terrorist groups perpetrated attacks against Jews and British officials in what was then mandatory Palestine throughout the 1920s and 30s, culminating in the Great Revolt beginning in 1936. None of this is a secret. The events are thoroughly documented. Anyone not aware of this history has no business writing about the Israel-Islamist conflict. But to acknowledge that the terrorists who murdered children and the elderly, raped women and girls en masse, and incinerated families on October 7th have much in common with their forebears, who murdered Jews a century ago, is tantamount to admitting that this isn't about settlements or the lack of a Palestinian state, or even the rebirth of Israel in 1948. It's about Jews existing in freedom and social and political equality in their indigenous land. Murdering Jews is not armed resistance, and the Washington Post is not a serious newspaper.